Greetings, everyone. How are you today? I am Dr. Noni Davis. I am the co owner of St. C Academy, which is an African Center school located here in Durham, North Carolina. I am a legacy owner, second generation. My mother and father opened St. C Academy in 1996. We are African Center, which means that our curriculum is focused on the experience of African people. And so today I'm so fortunate to be back in my office, although I need to do some overhaul and reorganizing and everything, because my students just presented a very dynamic theatrical production on Friday. Um, but today I want to start with, I want to share that experience with you, but I want to start with the idea of one of my arguments with American, European, or European Western education and curriculum is that it is very narrow, and it's of course through a Eurocentric lens. And we have all of these. We have African American children, we've got Asian children, we've got indigenous people here in this country who rarely have a real in-depth look at themselves, and particularly for African Americans, our narrative always begins just with our enslavement. For the most part, it's changing, but it hasn't changed significantly in my opinion. But um from the textbooks, you start with your science book, you always start with Greeks, you start with Romans, you start with people from the Renaissance period of, the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s of Europe and their contributions to science. You start with, if it's social studies, you start with European explorers, why, these fantasy things about what Europeans were looking for, the spices in the West, when actually they were looking for Mansa Musa's gold. You have, give thanks to Howard French, who wrote Born in Blackness. Um, and so our narrative always, there's this tendency to stick us at 1619, and that's where your beginnings were as African people. Never mind that the people who arrived in Virginia in 1619, or Jamestown, Virginia, were people who were brought over from the Mbundu Empire of Queen Nzinga of Angola. And so we, I mean, Asians are given, a nod. They get Genghis Khan, they get their traditional languages, they get their indigenous languages, and they get, idea of their systems of government and imperial. We've seen their movies and blah 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 blah. And we've also seen, with regards to indigenous people, they do nod to them, the Mexican empire. We know about the Mound people. We know that there were a lot of places here. Of course, they're still presented as these people who had no civilization, wherein, their civilization in many ways was more advanced than what we are now living in. And so, but Africans, ooh, we got to fight for everything. And so a lot of times what they'll do is they're trying to reframe your narrative as, well, at least you did this. So, we'll talk about, 1619 Africans came here. Oh, and then let's see, we could go back further, because I did know about 1619, but I was an adult when I found out about St. Augustine in Florida, which was an all black town that the Spanish had created for black people who were enslaved and who worked, and they were able to earn their freedom. Um, and then you also have Fort Mose, which was composed of African people who with an African militia, and they were very much involved, with the Underground Railroad. All my life I thought everybody was going north to freedom, and then I found out, oh my God, people were going south of Florida because because our history only begins with Virginia at 1619, because we are under this British historical, worldview. But the Spanish were here too in the 1500s. They brought, and they traveled with um, several Moors who knew how to navigate the waters, I guess, because of the history of Abu Bakr II and the history of Africans traveling. So the Moors had all of this knowledge as well of go do these transatlantic expeditions. And so, we were gifted at that. And so a lot of our Moorish brothers in the 1500s were, or in the late 1400s and 1500s, were on those ships as we were navigating. These Europeans were navigating from Portugal and Spain and all those places. And so Esteban Durantes is one of the most famous ones. And he explored, I think I've discussed him earlier, from Florida all the way across to Texas, Arizona area. And he was the lead. He was enslaved, but he ended up being the lead on that, and had acquired numerous, he was able to speak, I think, at least six indigenous languages, and which helped him. And he was able to practice, some of their traditions. He took the time to study these people and learn in medicine and stuff like that. But and so that's great. I didn't know that until I became an adult. I didn't know. I mean, I knew about 1619 because they drilled that into our heads with the pilgrims and da da da, Massachusetts, all these people coming over here. So that was drilled, but we never saw ourselves in the curriculum for the most part. And I think just recently I did see, like on some of the practice testing, they did introduce Mansa Musa in some of the questionnaires. But even when you look at that, the textbook, they still will not introduce ancient Kemet, as they're like, writing systems began in Mesopotamia. And I just want to scream when I see that stuff. And then they talk about what, all these cities. And I had to tell my kids, I don't know the answers to this nonsense, because I don't care about European social studies. No, I don't care about no more. Once I found out about my people, I'm like, oh great, that's good. I know enough of y'all to know, but I need to know more of myself. So anyway, all of the historical record of African people living as enslaved people and traveling with Europeans is indeed a part of our whole history. However, as the first people on this planet, I believe that it is crucial to know all of this information. And like most people, a lot of this information I was never taught in schools. So let's go on to the beautiful thing that we have as an opportunity to have an African Center School. So the African Center School centers you in your African worldview. And yeah, we do a lot of research. We do a lot of talking about these people, from ancient Africa and medieval Africa, and late 1800s, or late 19th century Africans. But the most beautiful thing, if you really want to imprint something on a child's mind, is to have them do a theatrical production. And so this year, I've done this theme before. It's called Sankofa Time Machine. And the first time St. Cia did this, we we presented it. Sankofa means return to the past and learn for the future. So we created this pyramid time machine, and this time machine traveled back in space. And the threat was that our antagonist was this woman who was tired of Black history, and she wanted to just erase all of it. So the kids had to go back in time to get it back. And so they landed in different periods of African history. So they did, I think it was Nefertari and ancient Egypt, and then they went to Marcus Garvey, and then they did Harriet Tubman, and we did about 5 or 6 different places. And so this year, Baba Zaid, who is my co-teacher, decided to take that same Sankofa time machine and said, okay, now this year we're going to go. we're going to stay in Africa. And the through line for this one was that the children, it opens up with a classroom and children like, I don't believe there's no African heroes and what you talking about, teacher, and dot. And so they argue with him, but he's like, well, okay, whatever. I'm gonna teach you this stuff. And two of the students overhear him and they say, hey, uh, can you really teach us something about Black history? He said, well, yeah, but I actually have something else. I have this special way of doing it. And they were like, well, what are you, part of the FBI? It was a very cool presentation. But the most beautiful thing of it is that we had created these scenes from ancient Kush, where we presented Amenarenas. We had one of our very beautiful young women present Amenarenas, who was a Kandaki queen from Ethiopia or Kush area, and the Kandakis were well known for being warrior women. And she had a whole eye patch across her face because she had lost it fighting the battle with the Romans. And so the kids were in these scenes with these personalities, these real personalities. And so we did a little short, brief little skit with her. And then the kids got back in the time machine, and this time they traveled to visit Mansa Musa, and the children participated. Some of them are really good artists. We and I joined, and Baba Zayd and I, we all joined our two or three of our other students, and we drew the backdrops for ancient Kush, Mansa Musa, with all of the his people in the background cheering him on. And we drew they left Mansa Musa, who was the wealthiest person in the world, and they visited his court. So we have students who are portraying being members of his court. We transported from there to Queen, I think it was Queen Amina, and Queen Amina was from Benin, and she was talking about her strategies to save her country from invasion. We went from and I designed all of these amazing outfits, I think, anyway, because no one could look the same because it was six different eras in time. So but the kids learned about her. Then they went to Mbundu, and they learned about Nzinga, the Queen Nzinga of Angola. They left there and they went down to Shaka Zulu. And Shaka Zulu is, in South Africa. And we had a whole, we had dances from the Lamban for Mansa Musa. We did a bucket dance kind of rhythm where the girls had to dance, and they had their African outfits on with leopard skin and sticks and grass skirts. And Shaka Zulu was back there, and they had their shields and it was like, oh my god. And so then he had to speak, and he had his entourage of warriors. And then we left there and we went back to Santawa. And I think I forgot some of that. No, I did. Let's see. I said, yeah, Amina, Amina Reynes, Shaka Zulu, no, Mansa Musa, Amina, oh yeah, and Bundu, Shaka Zulu. Okay, and then we ended up with Ya Asantewa. And so Ya Asantewa, was defending the stool and fighting the British. And each time the children went into these, like I said, they had to go into the time machine, travel to this era, and interrupted some kind of thing that was going on where these people were at war with some kind of European entity, European country. But it was on the other side where we were victorious, and we were fighting them. And so instead of having this narrative of these poor Black people, just like, what did they do over there? We didn't have any culture, we didn't have any strategy, we didn't have any um what did they do when this happened? How did we get over here? But when you hear the names of these people and the things that they were saying and doing, and our kids are dressed in the garb. It's just like, when you go to these Shakespearean plays and everybody is saying and this and thou and bop the dee that. Our children are dressed in African attire from top to bottom. They are speaking the views and concerns through the governing structure of these African um, heroes and heroines, and it's in their mouths, they're like, I'm in the scene with Queen Amenorrenas, and I'm like, oh my God, these kids are always gonna know this information. And I'm in the Mansa Musa scene. No, I'm in Corinne scene. Corinne is in Zinga. So I have to dress like this for Zinga. And somebody else, and I'm in Ya Santola scene and dot in Zulu. And so the kids, to their very core now, have this imprinted on their, or stamped on their soul, that there was an African empire, and there were several African empires, and women were ruling, men were ruling. So it gets rid of this whole notion that women can't, or only men can. It was about who was, and even in, especially Queen Nzinga, she had to really battle for her spot. Um, but and I know Ya Santoa was like, hey, if the men won't fight, we the women will fight. We will fight for this stool. We're not gonna let the British come in here and just take our golden stool. And it was epic in the sense that like I said, these kids, they danced it, they had fun with it, they had to memorize lines, they had to memorize music, because there were all of the intervals, the transitions from one scene to the next scene, where da 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 da, djembes and dooms, and sambans and kinkinis and all this stuff, all transitioning the play from one scene to the next. And um ultimately, the goal is to instill within our children a strong sense of self, a strong sense of who they are, a strong sense that you're beginning when someone says, well, I'm going to talk about uh um Prince Henry, the whatever, that number, that person, that crazy person. This person is the one who started the slave trade. His name. But anyway, when they start talking about him, Prince Henry the Navigator, they can speak of him, and through that narrative, that 13, I mean, 100, 100 years before him, the reason why he was even thinking about trying to find something before he was even born, there was Mansa Musa, and there was Abubakar II. That's in my children's mouths, that's in their heart, that's in their soul, that's in their being. If someone were to talk about, any of these other people, Vespucci, Amerigo Vespucci, they're like, okay, yeah, 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 we know about Amerigo Vespucci, but do you know that that during the time that he was doing all his nonsense, we had a whole queen named, Nzinga, um, who was fighting the Portuguese and trying to get the Dutch to come to join her in their fight against the Portuguese. And and it's really interesting because the other narratives that you're hearing through this, through the conversation, through the script that Baba Zay wrote so fantastically, was this idea that they were having to really strategize, because they did not understand how these people that they were encountering, on the one hand, were calling themselves holy people, and Zinga was like, okay, y'all are Christian, and you said if I become a Christian that you would leave me alone. me alone. And so here we are. I'm continuously having to try to figure out what is going on with y'all, because they had never encountered people who were so hypocritical in their life. And so that conversation is also in the script, so the children are seeing, huh, some of, you can come to these conclusions that a lot of what happened to us was also because of our confusion with this lack of integrity, this lack of moral character. People could actually say one thing and do another. People could actually present themselves through a holy text, and then at the same time uh, violate that text while holding you accountable. And I didn't even believe this stuff. So you're telling me that I'm not a Christian, and therefore I don't have any kind of voice. And I'm like, so why am I being held accountable for something I didn't know? And then when I say, okay, let me meet you there, so we can find a space of agreement, and then you still disparage me, then what do I do with that? And and you see that continuously throughout other African encounters with Europeans. There was a lot of, I don't understand what's going on, because, and it's not that we were perfect, but that there was a through line of some level of integrity, of being a person of your word. And so for us also, that's something that our children get to see. What is the governing structure of African Americans? And we know that we had our people saying, Shaka Zulu is off the chain. So we had our people who were whose um whose integrity was questionable. And even among his own people, they're like, uh are you going too far? you know and of course he did have reason, because of some of the tragedies that he had experienced in his life. It formed within him a certain position, like, these people try to take me out. My mama died. I've lost my mind. I'm gonna take care of everybody. I'm gonna take everybody out, rather. But so there is at least some justification for his response. But with Europeans, what was the justification? What was it? Who had harmed you? Who had caused you any grief? Who had and what was the decision making behind uh uh proclaiming the Africans could not were not human and had no rights within the land? And so I just feel like this is that the theatrical production, it was very successful. The parents loved it. Our parents were amazed. Our guests were flabbergasted because so many of them, like I said, had no idea who some of these people were. They may have been familiar with one or two of our the empires we presented, but most of them did not know all of these people. And I'm proud to say that I did, because I have studied for a while. And Amina Reynolds, I didn't know her name personally, but I knew of the Kandakis. And so when they said that she was a Kandaki, I said, oh, okay, that's she may have been one of the ones I missed, but I was familiar with the Kandaki Queens. And so and that is not to brag. This is just because that's what I'm here to do. That's my job, to know who these people are as I present it to my children. But I just would like to encourage everyone, as much as you can, if the Europeans can begin their history within the United States with England, who was the last crew. They could begin it with the Dutch, who were like, I think, the second. If they could begin with the French, who were like right before the English. If they could begin it with Spain, which is right before the Spanish, and if they could, right before France, and if they can begin it with Portugal. These people did not have any history they were going through black plagues. They were doing, I mean, going through that the black plague hit them right after they kicked out the Moors. I think something happened when they started acting up. They all got sick around 1100s or whatever, um, because the Moors had taught them, starting around 600s. Hey, this is how you take a bath. Oh, this is how you clean yourself. Oh my goodness, you might want to educate yourself. So the Moors, and African Moors, had brought a system of governance and hygiene, education, all of that stuff to Portugal and laid the foundation. But they didn't have no money. So how did they get the money? They had to go out and get it from and yeah, Portuguese had nothing, but the Moors, Spanish Moors were Spain was in better shape because of the Moors. But we need to know what we were doing, what we were doing before, and that's the reason why I've introduced the Hunter's Oath. I've introduced Kodokan Fuga, compared this thing to the Magna Carta, introduced, I would like, Abubakar II. I would like to maybe next time compare the Quran Fuga with the Ma'at, so we can see that from East Coast to West Coast, and even with the Ethiopian worldview, how was this? What was the governance? What was the ways of knowing of African people? Was there unified thought, or and if there was dissension, what were the areas of dissension? Like, what was their general idea or concept that was across the continent? Because we know that even in Europe, there seems to be a thread of, empires are dictated by war. Wherein Africans, we did engage in war, but what were some of the premises? Because it seemed that killing one another was not the goal. If you went to war, you were always looking for negotiation and not annihilation necessarily. So I would like to, maybe present that next week. But in the interim, I hope that you all have learned about Queen Amenorhanes, Mansa Musa, Queen Amina, Queen Nzinga, King Shaka Zulu, and Queen Yasantawa. And maybe you can share some of this information with your own children as we start our journey back to before the United States. I mean, my ancestors were Africans. My ancient ancestors were Africans. They were not slaves. They were not slaves. They were enslaved people that came from the oldest place in the world, and that be Africa. And so that's pretty much all that I have to say today. And give thanks. Ashe.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course I walk into the sound of drums.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course I know my mother.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course I can play the drum.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course I can work with my hands.
I'm a St. Cia student.
One day, we won't need this day. We won't need a day to celebrate how far we've come. We won't need a day to prove we're just as fast or strong or skilled. We won't need a day to relive the comebacks, the firsts, or the titles we've won. We won't need a day to rally behind the ones fighting to change the rules. One day, we won't need this day at all, because one day, this day, will be our everyday.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.